Hello there and welcome, and also welcome back if you're back. This is episode 4 of Sweet Vegan Spills the Tea podcast. This episode is fat shaming, and for those of you who were lured here by that sexy title, hoping that we are going to talk about societal issues with fat, body fat specifically, and physical fat shaming. That's not what this episode is about. But don't be disappointed, because next episode, we have a guest on the show for the very first time, Cara Roy, and she and I get all up into Weight Watching and diet culture and body image and body shaming and body positivity and even toxic positivity. And Cara talks to us about her personal weight loss journey, and it's a good episode and you should tune in for that. In the meantime, stick around. We're going to talk about dietary fat today. We'll touch a little bit on body fat, but it's going to be mostly dietary fat. So that is what we're up to today. Before we get started, I just want to say that it is a gorgeous, sunny day today here in Montreal. It's been beautiful for the last couple of days, and it is a weekday. It is a school day, and there are children passing by my window right in front of me on their way to school, and they're so cute, and they are screaming their heads off. So if you can hear that, I apologize, or you're welcome for having that little treat of joyful children screeching on their way to school. I wanted to also thank all the people who've been sending in questions and messages and feedback. It's been so incredibly cool and very rewarding and inspiring. And I know that it can be really whelming how much information is out there. And especially if you're not as, immersed in or infatuated with nutrition or health and wellness and all that stuff. There's a lot of information out there. It's a lot to take in, and sometimes you just don't want to. And I totally get that. But I also really appreciate the fact that there are a bunch of you out there who are genuinely interested and are sending me your questions and inspiring these episodes. So thank you for that. And that is where this episode came from. So I am essentially responding to a question about which fats are good fats and which fats are bad fats and which ones do we actually need, etc. So that's what we're going to get into today. To begin with, I will just quickly touch on body fat, because there is a bit of confusion for some people regarding the difference between dietary fat and body fat. And I'll get into that. I'm going to talk about subcutaneous body fat and visceral body fat. So subcutaneous body fat is that jiggly fat just below the surface of our skin that is very visible from the outside and is relatively harmless. It's mostly harmless. Mostly. It can be incredibly uncomfortable for some people. It can mean not fitting into certain clothes or furniture or yoga positions that we once could or would like to. It might mean a lot of rubbing and chafing on a hot summer's day, but mostly it's harmless. And I say mostly, but I'll explain that in a second. Visceral fat, on the other hand, is the fat that wraps itself around our organs and can be a symptom and also a cause of all kinds of health issues. And that is the one that really puts us at risk. The connection between the two, and the reason why I said subcutaneous fat is mostly harmless, is that I believe our visceral fat makes up about 10% of our overall body fat. So of course, everybody's different and this varies from person to person a little bit, but overall, basically, it is believed by health professionals that about 10% of your body fat is visceral fat. So that dangerous fat. And that means that people who are carrying excess subcutaneous fat more often than not are also carrying excess visceral body fat. And that means that as much as people don't like to talk about this, and please don't confuse this with a reason for people to feel ashamed or embarrassed or disappointed in themselves, or for a reason for anyone other than your own self to have an opinion about where your body's at. That is not at all what this is about. I am just saying blatantly and truthfully that people who are carrying a lot of excess body weight are more at risk of developing sleep disturbances, sleep apnea, cardiovascular issues, thyroid dysfunction, type 2 diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, definitely of having extra strain on their joints. So accelerated symptoms and issues regarding osteoarthritis, for example, and other kinds of arthritis. It is a real thing. And that's all I'm going to say today about body fat. Tune in to the next episode if you want to get more into it. But that's where we stop, because this episode is actually, as I said earlier, about dietary fat. And I'll connect the two here and there now that we've gotten that out of the way. So let's jump in. Dietary fat. A lot of people refer to as either good fats or bad fats. So we'll start with the bad fats. Just get those out of the way. What are bad fats? Bad fats are basically saturated fats. So the fats that are often found in processed foods and in animal products. And saturated fats are often, but not always, solid, even at room temperature, whereas a non-saturated fat will melt when it's warm. It won't stay solid like that. But that's just a side note. It's not a way for you to determine whether or not the fat you're eating is saturated or not. Saturated fats, as I said, are found often in processed foods. And I'm not sure if it's because it is less expensive. I don't know if it is, but I do know that it doesn't spoil as quickly as other fats. So I imagine if you have products on the shelf that you want lasting quite a long time, it would make more sense to use saturated fats, but they're bad for you. And as I said, they're often found in processed foods and in animal foods. Absolutely. The fats in all animal foods, that's saturated fats. And also in tropical oils like palm oil and coconut oil. Coconut oil. Oh no, I know. Everybody talked for the longest time about how healthy coconut oil is for you, and it's not. It smells amazing and it is delicious, but it is, I think, 90% saturated fat. It is not good for you. You don't need it in your life and you should avoid using it. I'm not saying never, never, never eat anything that has any kind of saturated fat in it. I'm just telling you it's not good for you. So I would limit it as much as possible if I were you. I sometimes use it, coconut oil, for example, in a granola that I make or the occasional vegan cheese from time to time, but I do try and avoid it as much as possible. And I suggest you do the same. If you're able to cut saturated fats out of your diet entirely, you're amazing and you're my superhero, and that's incredible. But I expect that you're probably also human and, living your life. So that's just my recommendation to you, is to limit it as much as possible. Some reasons why saturated fat is a bad fat or considered a bad fat is that, first of all, your gut microbiome or the microbiota can become unhealthfully imbalanced. I'm not sure there's a healthful imbalance anyways, but it can definitely be imbalanced by saturated fats. And they can also contribute to the permeability of your intestinal barrier. So that barrier is what keeps bacteria and toxins from leaving your digestive system and going into your bloodstream, and saturated fats can really contribute to the deterioration of that barrier. And that is not helpful. So basically, saturated fats are an excellent recipe for gut dysbiosis, which we know and discussed at great length in episode 3 of this podcast, where we talked about the gut-brain connection and how our microbiome can affect our mental health as well as our physical health, that gut dysbiosis can contribute to, if not cause, a host of health issues, and some of which are life-threatening. So we want to keep our gut microbiome as healthy as possible. So we want to avoid those saturated fats. I'm not sure how much of what I'm hearing here in this room is being heard by the listeners and viewers of this podcast. I'm just telling you that the recycling trucks are going by, and instead of being annoyed, I'm going to keep in mind that I could have planned this better timing wise. And then I don't know what, yay, recycling. Recycling is a good thing. I just hope that you can actually hear me louder or more clearly than the recycling trucks. If you hear them at all, hopefully you don't even hear them. Okay. So probably the most commonly spoken about effect of saturated fats would be how they affect your heart health, which is, fair, because they do contribute to higher blood pressure and higher levels of what is considered the bad cholesterols. They contribute to the clogging of arteries. And obviously all of this leads to a higher risk of heart disease and heart attack and stroke. So that's not good. But the heart is not the only muscle that is affected by saturated fats either. Saturated fats can damage all muscle cells and also contribute to the accumulation of the free radicals that promote inflammation, which is uncomfortable and a waste of your body's energy, and can be painful and can contribute to or even cause a bunch of autoimmune disorder in your body. And that is something you definitely do not want to be dealing with. So another reason to avoid them. But in addition to that, saturated fat buildup in the membranes of the muscle correlates with insulin resistance. And in fact, when you eat saturated fat, both your insulin action and insulin secretions are impaired within hours of eating it. So it's not just like a long-term accumulation of having eaten a lot of saturated fat day after day or week after week. It is literally within hours of eating it that your body responds negatively. Saturated fats can also impair kidney function. And as I said earlier, they contribute to the amount of visceral fat. Did I say that earlier? Okay. So anyways, they do contribute to excess body fat. They do contribute to excess visceral fat. And as I said earlier, that fat wraps itself around our organs. And as you can imagine, that is not helpful for the function of any of the organs that are affected by that fat. So should we move on? Should we leave bad fats behind and move on to good fats? Because there's a bunch of those too. Not all fat is bad. I just quickly though, wait, one more thing about bad fat. Can I? There are diets being promoted all the time that are very high fat, low carb diets. And we do talk about that more in the next episode of this podcast, episode 5. But I just also want to point out that a lot of those high fat diets, while there are, a few different dietary issues with them, we're just focusing on fat today. I just want to say a lot of those diets, the high fat that they're recommending in these diets is saturated fats. So fats from animal products, for example, and from tropical oils. So please be mindful if you are following a high fat diet of what kind of fats you're putting into your body. That would have been a better segue, right? Because then you could be like, what kind of fats should we put into our body, Jen? And then I would say, good fats. And then you would be like, what are good fats? And then I would start telling you right now that good fats are fun and really easy to identify. And here's how. Good fats are fats that are in plant-based whole foods. So not processed and refined and turned into something else, but originally lived in a plant-based whole food, but is currently still in its whole food state. So an avocado, a walnut, a hemp seed, these are good fats. These are essential fatty acids that our body cannot produce on its own, and we are reliant on dietary sources of. You've probably heard them referred to as your omegas, your omega-3s, and your omega-6s. And I recently got a question, that's why we're here today, about the difference between the two and whether or not it is true that omega-3s are good for you, but omega-6s are not. So I will just answer you right away. No, it's not true. You need both. Both are great. Now I'll explain. So omega-3s are a key family of polyunsaturated fats, and they are the EPA, DHA, and ALA. And they are wonderful at lowering your blood pressure and preventing heart disease and lowering your triglycerides and improving your blood vessel function and all kinds of other great stuff that we're going to talk about in a second. And yes, you absolutely need them. They're wonderful things. Omega-6s are also really great at lowering bad LDL cholesterol and boosting productive HDL. They are great for regulating your blood sugars by improving your sensitivity to insulin. These are wonderful things. They can combat inflammation and prevent blood clots, but sometimes elevated levels of omega-6s can be an indicator of inflammation. And this is why some people think that omega-6s are bad for you. The key here is basically to keep them in balance and not to have your omega-6s way up here and your omega-3s way down here, which is very common in the Western diet. We get a lot of the plant oils and stuff that omega-6s are in our diets, and much less of the foods like, no, I'm going to tell you in a minute about much less of the foods that are rich sources of omega-3s in our basic standard Western diet. So like I said, the key here is balance. Remember when I said I was going to get into it about the health benefits of omegas? I'm going to do that right now. And I'm going to start with the brain. So 1 to 3% of Alzheimer's patients actually have the deterministic genes. That means that over 90% of Alzheimer's is preventable. And it is preventable in a number of ways, including things like mental and physical activity, adequate restorative sleep, lifestyle changes, stress levels, exposure to pollutants, and, what am I missing? Oh, nutrition. So the thing is that multiple studies have demonstrated that omega-3 fatty acids play a major role in the function and health of the brain and affects it in many ways, including membrane fluidity, synaptic function, cerebral blood flow, and then also slowing down the deterioration of the brain. So as we age, our brains shrink naturally, but it has been shown that people with much lower levels of omega-3s tend to accelerate. Does that make sense? Like their brain shrinks at an accelerated rate in comparison to people who are, getting adequate amounts of omega-3s. That's what I'm trying to say. That was not eloquently said at all, but it's true. So there you have it. And you may have heard, because many influencers on social media these days have been very enthusiastically promoting the idea that we need saturated fats in our diet because the brain is made of fat and therefore needs more fat. And I am here to tell you that they are partially correct and mostly wrong. And The reason being that our brains do have a lot of fat, but it's structural fat. And the only fat that our brains actually use is omega-3 fatty acids. So this is probably the reason why forever people have referred to fish as brain food. I'm sure you've heard that before. And the reason for fish being brain food would be that fish are candidates for, no, that's not how I want to say this. How do I want to say this? Fish can be a good source, dietary source of omega-3 fatty acids. And the cool thing about that is that the reason why fish can be a good source of omega-3 fatty acids is because fish eat really excellent sources of omega-3 fatty acids. They don't make them themselves. They're eating that food, and then you're eating the fish. Not all of you, obviously, but people are eating the fish so that they can get the stuff that the fish ate. And it's very much like I mentioned in episode 2 of this podcast, where I talked about vitamins and supplements and B12. I explained that cows, beef, don't actually produce B12. They eat it, and then people eat the cow and therefore get some of that B12. And it's the same thing with these omegas. So when people eat fish, they get the omegas that the fish are eating. Same thing. So again, you can actually cut out the middleman, we'll call that little fish, and just go directly to the source. Isn't that exciting? Yes, it's very exciting. I know. Before I tell you about the source, the magical secret source, and how to get to it, I wanted to tell you also that you might actually hear people say that the fatty acids, the ALA that you get from nuts and seeds and stuff, is not the same or the same quality as what you would get from the fish. So another good reason to keep in mind the fact that the fish are actually getting their omegas from a source, a magical secret source that I'm about to unveil any second now. Also, omegas have been linked to lowered blood pressure, lowered levels of bad cholesterol, and overall better cardiovascular health, and to more diverse and numerous good bacteria in your gut. Yay! Happy, healthy gut bugs, which we want and love. And I could talk about for hours and hours and hours right now if you wanted me to, but you probably don't. So I won't. But if you do, just message me and I will without hesitation, because oh my gosh, I love the gut so much. You know that. Anyone who knows me knows that. So there you have it. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before, but you can actually go on, what is it? Anchor.fm/Sweet Vegan Spills the Tea and leave a voice message if you want to. And if you follow me on Instagram, I'll stick that link in the bio even. If you ever just wanted to leave me a message, ask me a question, give me some feedback, tell me something fascinating that I can share on the podcast, and I will share your sweet little voice saying it or asking it or sharing it. Okay, where was I? Oh, yes, the source. There's more than one source. There's a bunch of sources. Even leafy greens have some omega fatty acids. But a more plentiful source would be a place. You can go to the chia seed, you can go to the hemp seed, flax seeds, walnuts, avocados, Brazil nuts, pumpkin seeds, sesame, edamame, cruciferous vegetables. I think Brussels sprouts, like a half cup of Brussels sprouts even has like around 135 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids. I read that recently, I'm pretty sure. I could be making that up, but I feel like it's real. And then, sources of omega-6s would be peanut butter, almonds, cashews, and sunflower seeds, tofu, I'm going to leave a link in the show notes to a blog post that has all kinds of whole food plant-based sources of omegas for you. And I'm also going to tell you EPA and DHA, which is the actual secret magical source where fish get their omegas from. Dun, dun, dun. Seaweed. So if you like sushi, you're good to go. And algae. So algae you can get from putting a little bit of spirulina powder in your smoothie in the morning or the afternoon or after your workout or whenever you like smoothies. And if you don't like smoothies, put it in your salad dressing or a soup or whatever you want. My only recommendation to you is if you have never had spirulina or algae powder, like try it a tiny bit at a time. Like just increase it slowly, just to be sure that you like it. Because in my experience, it can be quite strong flavor of fishiness. It can be a bit jarring at first if you're not used to it. And you know what? If the whole food plant-based sources of the EPA and DHA are not doing it for you, if you're not a big sushi fan and you're just like, I can't stand algae powder, although I have seen some that claim to not have as strong of a fish flavor, but I haven't tried them, so I don't know if they're any good. Anyways, if you don't want any seaweed or algae in your life or in your mouth that you can taste, I can recommend, I will recommend for you a couple of omega fatty acid supplements that are derived of, that are algae oil. So I will do that for you. Because again, you can just go straight to the source. You don't need to eat the fish and the omegas that the fish ate, along with whatever disgusting chemicals and plastics and what have you that might be in that fish's system. Okay. If you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, feelings, or feedback that you want to share with me, or if you would like a 15-minute free health and wellness consultation or information on my coaching services or nutritionist services, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. My email address is sweetvegancoaching@gmail.com. You can reach out to me on Facebook. There is a Sweet Vegan Coaching Facebook page. There is also Instagram @_sweetvegan_. And also you can go to my website, sweetvegan.net, where not only can you contact me, but you will find all kinds of free recipes, a free meal plan, and you can subscribe to my free digital magazine that I just started up and am publishing seasonally, at least for the moment, but I'm very excited about, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So check it out. And thank you again so much for being here today, and take really good care of yourselves. Bye.